saw in 1929. It's everything we saw with the Nikkei crashing in the 80s. It's everything that we saw in 2008. So it was not, wasn't anything new. The new is we're taking new financial technologies to transmit value around the world. We're taking new financial technologies to redefine how money is and what money is. And so human behavior, the psychological behavior is the same regardless of whether it's 1400 or 1900 or 2020. And so that risk is not understanding how humans act and how they hoard and how they become greedy and how that infects and infiltrates the system to the point where leverage builds up so much that everybody's like, oh, this or that can't happen, and then it just repeats.
Yeah. You know, I'm not sure if I can build off too much off of what just was said about the subject, but I'll maybe talk about it a little bit differently. And first of all, I congratulate the audience for investing time to be in a conversation about risk this morning on a Sunday, because this actually may have more to do, and the expertise that you're hearing on this panel may have more to do with the success of your projects, the success of the industry, than any other topic here in a kaleidoscope of great subjects that have been curated for everybody, okay? So there's a lot of great stuff here, but this really does matter. And I'll talk about the subject of risk maybe a little bit differently because it's obvious, it's also a pet peeve of mine right now. And one of the blessings and curses of growth and adoption with the mainstream traditional players is you have all this establishment money coming in. And when that happens, it changes the dynamics. Like everybody wants to build a project. Some people are building projects that are purely altruistic for the betterment of people and so on and so forth. But a lot of people are here to engineer solutions that have great utility to make money. Nothing wrong with that. But when traditional money, institutional money comes in, the market dynamics then start to behave like not a new nascent industry. They start to be driven by institutional trading behavior. What's going on with the big players, and that is happening right now in our space. There's one other thing that you innovators, and I may say this again later on today, but I am not a technologist. I'm a groupie. I love technologists. I'd like to think I understand a little bit about what they do. I can't even spell C++, okay? So I'm not that guy. But I'm questioning whether some of the people that are developing projects can spell C++. One of the challenges we have right now is industry credibility. And I would challenge the industry meaningfully, to think smarter about code, about what they're building. Because the exploits that we've left open in the industry to that risk, to bad actor risk, right now, are remedial. As a matter of fact, any self-respecting hacker will tell you they almost feel guilty, almost, for some of the exploits because it's so easy. We've built things that are easy to take advantage of. And then my last point, before I shut up, is that what that does is not only hurt the economies of what otherwise would be really good projects, but it puts on a silver platter those who would want to regulate the industry in a more heavy-handed way. We're giving them that. We're giving them that. So that's another dimension of risk I would tee up for everybody.
And you guys said a few things I want to elaborate on. One, something specifically unique to crypto is smart contract risk, which you briefly just touched on. And I do want to get to the point of C5 versus DeFi and some of those various risks as well, but sticking to smart contract risk, how do you evaluate that? Do you need to have a data scientist? Who do you need to have on your team to evaluate that risk?
Well, I think like a lot of that right now, honestly, is just outsourcing that to just trusting the main auditing firms that are out there and kind of hoping that nothing goes wrong. That's, I think, the reality of like this stage of the industry. But I want to touch on one specific point, and that is over the past 2 years, the largest exploiting point in crypto has been the bridges. And I've also like thought about this a lot, but it's we talk about how like decentralized everything is crypto, but yet we have like some of these big sort of centralized failing points
So right.
that a lot of people are
Yep.
thinking about how to sort of reconstruct, these, how to sort of, apply different mechanisms, but we still have to, aside from like the smart contract risk, figure out sort of like the bridges. There's still a lot of major protocols that have almost $10 billion of TVL, directly and indirectly, and the entire sort of chain runs on the multi-sig held by a few individuals. So these are all the points that, as you mentioned, when institutional money comes in, and some of them have come in, and I've been surprised that they haven't marked these as red flags, and I think that's part of the sort of the learning curve,
Yeah.
right? To sort of come in down, dip your toe in and kind of figure out, okay, like the fact that 3 people hold a multi-sig is a problem. The fact that there's $800 million on a bridge that is, and a lot of these things just sort of, the learning curve in crypto for auditing firms also happens as like trial and error, right? Like one exploit happens, and then auditing firms learn from it and check this specific point for the next sort of protocols. And so a lot of these just kind of happen, people learn from them, and it's just a matter of sort of how much will that mistake cost. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight the bridges and the multi-sig.
Yeah, then to some of that, and I'll kind of answer the way I think about and formulate the question. There in banking, there's always bank robbers, and we're so early that as Greg mentioned, it's kind of easy for the bank robbers. And as Irfan mentioned, the technology's not built well enough to stand at this point. Doesn't mean it can't happen, doesn't mean we don't get there, but over time, I started in computer science a long time ago, finished in finance, and the greatest thing that I did and the greatest risk to society today is I had to sit down and go through C++ classes for a couple of semesters, a couple of years.
So you can
And
spell it.
so I can spell it, right?
See?
Yeah. So I learned to code, and at that point, we weren't making function calls. We were writing the entire function that decoded and encoded messages and whatnot. So I was never going to be a great programmer or developer, but I started to think algorithmically at the front end of the world, transitioning to everything running off software and algorithms. So the biggest risk for kids and young people and even adults in business today is not understanding how code works, and then being able to convey that and relate that to how does the human that doesn't care, that just wants to go to the store, swipe and go, buy whatever security and go, how they're going to interact. Because if you don't understand how the math and the logic works, and you don't understand how someone wants to use this technology, then you end up with these bridges that are broken and allow exploits to happen. So when I look at different projects or smart contracts, I'll read the white paper and simply toss them out by the number of buzzwords used. Because you read these paragraphs that don't even make sense, because there's 82 of the most popular buzzwords in 2 sentences. And so you're like, well, okay, that doesn't even make sense, but are people going to use this within the next 1 to 3 years? Even if you can do it and do it successfully, will they use it? If not, then that's something that's probably 10 years from now. Do I want to invest or want to risk my capital, time, effort, and energy to further that project? So that's how I look at it.
Well, the only other thing I would add is I don't think we need smart contracts. I think we need brilliant contracts, right? We need genius contracts. And I'm being a little bit coy here, but the reality is I think that's the state of where we're at. Even Nick Sabo, Sabo, tomato, tomato, however you want to go, even Nick would say, I don't know that the contracts are smart, nor if they really are contracts. So we've got other things we could unpack about smart contracts that the lawyers would love to sink into. And I think there's a panel later on today, I may not be on it, with lawyers that are going to talk about that legal element of this. But if we're at a Georgia Tech event and we're here in a Georgia Tech branded hotel, the tech is going to drive this, and we have to get better at not being sloppy and rushing to project maturity, because it's going to have terrible outcomes. And this goes back to some of the oldest parables or expressions that, I don't care what language you learned and you were raised with, the elders would always say, one bad apple spoils the bunch. And we're at an incredible inflection point of reputational risk. incredibly important moment for the industry right now. And we all have a role to play. So having sober conversations like this, having entrepreneurial conferences like this are really important, but to come out of it with an understanding of this moment in time. Because guess what, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, big finance, TradFi, central bankers, governments were not paying attention. Guess what? Careful what you wish for. Everyone is paying attention right now. And so that's an important moment that we need to be very present in right now.
Yeah, one thing I'll add is there was a key point Greg just made about Nick Szabo. If you want to take away something from this conference that will add value to your life going forward, if you stay in the space, it's go consume everything the guy's written, everything the guy said. He's the godfather of smart contracts, but he said directly, Bitcoin is a phenomenal system. They have that capability. They're not there yet technically because they focus on security and stability first, so it's like DOS. Smart contracts are a phenomenal technology, monetary phenomenon, but they're currently built on crap systems. Doesn't mean that those systems can't get better, and doesn't mean that you don't have smart contracts and other systems that do well and create bridges back to the collateral asset. But his writings, his work, wherever you can follow him on videos, I would consume it all, and that would de-risk you going forward probably more than anything else.
Sure. Yeah.
So we got about 5 minutes left. I want to be cognizant of time here. I want to ask, I think I'll shift the conversation a bit, not significantly, but ask an important, potentially uncomfortable question.
I'm uncomfortable already.
I'll start with Irfan. Do you think the typical retail investor understands the risks associated with crypto, specifically the differences between DeFi and CeFi?
Absolutely not. And I think that okay, what's happening, like in crypto, we talk a lot about giving open access to financial engineering and financial product to everybody globally, right? And that's great. But one big thing is that the majority of average retail user doesn't have a basic sort of understanding of a lot of the key concepts in crypto, like credit, like leverage, like risk. And so you sort of, and this is a topic of conversations I've had with a lot of my friends that are trying to come into DeFi and dabble a little in crypto and borrow against their ETH a little bit and kind of like play around and add liquidity, but they don't understand the key basics, right? Like they come borrow, let's say from Aave, for example, but they don't understand the health risk, the collateral ratio risk, and so I think we're definitely not there yet because it's a big jump from not knowing anything to kind of having to deal with a lot of what was before crypto considered financial, sophisticated financial engineering, sort of building derivative products and stuff like that. And so I think this learning curve from the retail side is still very early, and the fact that Doge pumps on a picture of the dog posted by Elon Musk for like 70% is a very key testament to that. So we definitely have a long way to go, and education is a huge part of it. So.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts there?
Yeah, I think I try to keep it funny sometimes. You ask one question when you look at it, is this CeFi or DeFi? And you just say, who's your daddy? And the reason why you say that is because who's the parent? Trace backwards. So if you look at a CeFi project, you're going to find a bank routing number somewhere in how you get value into or out of. That's CeFi. They had to hop through some form of regulation to get there. They probably went through Silvergate Bank. If you're, is this DeFi now? It's not exactly DeFi, but they handle a lot of the protocols. Who's the parent of FTX? Paul Tudor Jones, Tiger Management, Sequoia Capital. It's the who's who of the last 60, 70 years of Wall Street. So you have to think about what's their goal, and then you have these standalone protocols. If you look at Dan Moorhead's research, with the crypto crash, Celsius, Voyager taken down, but the DeFi protocols actually worked. the non-traditional TradFi, mirrored up with some technology didn't work, they failed. But the DeFi protocols where a human couldn't step in and say, yeah, we're not going to transfer that $100 million, that money went.
They were almost like the senior creditors in that,
Yeah.
in that sense.
So if you ask those questions, who's your daddy, and then what's the parent, and is there a bank account connected to it, like an ABA routing number, then it's probably CeFi.
Yeah, and I don't know that I could do a better job of answering in that regard, but first question is, full stop, no, that there is not a full understanding of the risk involved in the space right now, number one. In every dimension. You could argue that the venture firms did not understand the risk, and you could be very successful. You could argue that just about nobody is fully understanding that yet. And yet here we are. Looking forward optimistically because of just how big the moment is. It wasn't by accident, as most of you know, we're celebrating a 14-year anniversary from a white paper that literally may prove to be the most important white paper ever written, ever. Despite all of what's been going on, you still have this incredible interest from some of the smartest people on the planet in every dimension, in every region of the world. So we also have to understand that the risk to the industry, again, is impatience. We're early. And by early, I mean really still early. If this truly is what many of us believe it to be, then in our lifetime, we still may not see the true end result of what this moment has been. But we can architect it. We can set that in motion. And I think that's what all of us that are entrepreneurs in this space are trying to do right now, is to have a seat at the table and to just make some small contribution to what's taking place right now. But I'll emphasize something I said before. This is a moment where reputational risk is at its absolute highest right now, because we have everyone's attention. And nothing aggravates me more when I sit in a room of central bankers at times, and they say, if only we had some adults in the room, which is a ridiculous statement. The same adults that almost drove the financial system off a cliff. Thank you, no. By the same token, we need to understand that this is not going to be all or nothing TradFi versus DeFi. We are going to live in our lifetimes in hi-fi, period. Sorry. It's not going to happen. It's not going to be fully a decentralized world without government intervention and regulation. No, it's going to have to be a hi-fi world. So with that, if you buy into what I'm saying, then we all have to get along, and there's an opportunity for all of us to make a meaningful difference right now. So that would be my thought on a Sunday morning panel on risk. Yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah. One thing I'll just add, our signature protocols, Aave and Uniswap, B3 and everything else have passed the ultimate tests. Whenever we've made mistakes, we've paid for it. There hasn't been any bailouts. Even the largest funds and protocols went belly up and they paid for it. Unlike 2008, where the credit default swap risk ended up, there was no. So all I would say is the reputation, the bad side happens, sure, we get the exploits and everything, but we should also highlight the good side, that the signature protocols have weathered the storm really well, and that doesn't get enough credit.
Yeah,
I just want to add.
and that's a great point. I mean, the kids have a better track record than the adults in the room at the moment, because they've weathered one storm.
Mm-hmm.
The truly decentralized stuff worked,
Yeah.
and central banks have destroyed about 208 currencies since 1913. So the adults' track record is not.
You know where I stand on that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Agreed.
So,
I was just told we have 3 minutes, so I might pose one last question.
Lightning round.
Ooh.
This is for Greg. Regs.
Okay.
So we're talking about risks. We're talking about retail investors not understanding those risks. You can imagine where I'm going with this question. So regulation has been a hot topic in crypto.
Yeah.
Seems pretty uncertain as to what that might look like, but what are your thoughts on where it might go?
We're definitely going to have more regs, and we have a moment where I think we can continue to influence the extent of the regulation that's going to come into the space. look, it's a hard job to be a regulator, and as much as I buy into the notion, I'm here on a panel, talking about this stuff, when people get hurt, all of a sudden they forget about the principles of DeFi and the risks that they thought they were taking, and they want somebody to help them. And so if I'm right about there being this hybrid world, you're gonna have regulation. What I think is unique about the United States is we are the leading place for capital markets in the globe. I think we will continue to be, at least for the next century, even though we might see our primacy eroded a bit for a variety of different reasons. And so the challenge we have is we have multiple parties wanting to be the boss. It's a tale as old as time, okay? Cue the Angela Lansbury, all right? So it's a tale as old as time. They're fighting for this primacy right now. I eventually think within the next 10 years or so, maybe sooner, we have a unique regulatory body that is managing the digital space. I think it's an eventuality, but it's not gonna happen anytime soon. The thing to look for if you're watching the industry about investing is, what do establishment banks and broker dealers, financial firms like Merrill Lynch and others, big for Morgan Stanley, who do they start hiring? When they start hiring digital experts, not in the company for portfolio modeling, but for them to be reporting to the chief compliance officer, that's when you know we're about to take off in a way that the industry has never even seen.
Right.
And the irony is, I believe, the whole reason we started our firm was because we believe in the next 12 to 18 months that we'll have enough or additional regulatory rails, these firms will start to come in, and we will have a major seat at the table. That's what we believe. So,
Great. I think our time is up.
Oh, sorry.
But appreciate it, guys.